In my 76 years on this earth, I never imagined I would one day fear the very children I had raised. But what happened on a sweltering July afternoon in Houston changed everything. It was the kind of moment that divides your life into before and after. Before, I was a widow, trying to enjoy the company of my grown children. After, I was a mother fighting for her life. My name is Eleanor Ramirez. 2 summers had passed since I lost my husband, Carlos. In August of 2021, he and I had shared 54 years of marriage, raising 3 children who I believed would always be my pride and joy. His death left a hole nothing seemed able to fill. Since then, family gatherings had become rare, and when they did happen, the atmosphere was heavy with distance. So when my children suggested a beach day together in Galveston, I was overjoyed. I told myself, maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. We set up under a wide blue umbrella near a beachside bar. The air smelled of salt and grilled food. Gulls cried overhead, and children ran shrieking into the surf. My eldest son, David, 54, carried chairs and towels with a proud efficiency, while Elena, my middle child at 51, laid out a basket of expensive snacks that looked like they belonged on the cover of a magazine. Marco, my youngest at 47, brought nothing but his restless energy, bouncing from one conversation to another like a man with a secret he couldn't share. For a while, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: belonging. They spoke about their lives, their work, their plans for the future. I smiled, nodding, soaking in the moment as if I could preserve it like a photograph in my heart. Maybe the loneliness of widowhood was finally softening. And then my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with an unknown number. Normally, I ignore such messages. But this time, something compelled me to look. The words nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. Leave quietly. Do not tell your children. Your life depends on it. For a second, the sun dimmed. The waves fell silent, and even the gulls circling above seemed to vanish. I raised my eyes to David, Elena, and Marco. They were laughing about some trivial story, but suddenly their voices sounded different, too sharp, too rehearsed. My pulse hammered in my ears. Another vibration. A second text. Red car. Parking lot. Trust me. Fear shot through me, cold as ice. I had always trusted my instincts, and right now, every fiber of my being screamed that I was in danger. Slowly, I set down my glass of lemonade and forced a weak smile. I feel a little dizzy, I said, pressing my hand to my temple. Too much sun. I think I'll take a short walk. David immediately stood. Do you want me to come, Mom? No, I insisted, hiding my terror behind a shaky smile. Just a few steps. It'll be fine. And with that, I began the walk that would change my life forever. I walked carefully across the hot sand, every step a performance. My children thought I was going to clear my head, but in truth, my heart was thundering in my chest. The parking lot shimmered under the brutal Texas sun, rows of cars baking in silence. Then I saw it, a red sedan idling near the far corner. Beside it stood a young woman, her brown hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, her eyes darting nervously as she scanned the beach. When she spotted me, relief spread across her face. I froze in place, recognizing her instantly. Lucia? I whispered. It was Lucia Torres, a woman I had known for more than a decade. She had worked as a nanny for David's children when they were younger, later taking house-cleaning jobs to support herself and her little boy, Mateo. I always remembered her as polite, hard-working, and discreet. But why was she here? Ramirez, she said in a trembling voice, waving me closer. Thank God you came. Please. Get in the car. We don't have much time. Confused, but guided by the urgency in her tone, I slid into the passenger seat. The moment she closed her door, she locked the car and pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I know this sounds insane, she said, but your life is in danger. Your children, they're planning something terrible. The words hit me like a wave, almost knocking the breath from my lungs. What are you talking about? Lucia? She glanced around the lot before thrusting her phone toward me. On the screen was a photo of a document. My signature stood bold across the bottom. I found this yesterday while cleaning David's office. She explained quickly. You see that date? Last week. You signed it at his barbecue. He told you it was for insurance. I stared at the page. The lines above my name weren't insurance at all. They were an authorization for a bank transfer of $920,000. My life's savings. My voice broke as I tried to recall the afternoon. The laughter. The wine. The way I had felt so oddly drowsy. Lucia swiped to the next photo, a power of attorney giving David complete control over my assets. Another swipe, a draft of a will, leaving everything to my 3 children and erasing the charitable donations Carlos and I had carefully planned. My hand shook. This can't be real. It is, she said firmly, tears welling in her eyes. And it's only the beginning. Lucia took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she swiped to the next file. There's more you need to see. Mrs. Noti Fald. Ramirez. What I found explains why they're so desperate. On the screen appeared a grainy audio recording. David's voice was unmistakable. My son. The boy I once cradled in my arms. His tone, however, was cold, laced with panic. Raphael, give us more time, he pleaded. Another voice, sharp and menacing, cut through the speaker. Time is what you don't have. $370,000. By Thursday. No excuses. Or the corrections begin. I felt my stomach turn to ice. Corrections? What does that mean? Lucia's eyes filled with dread. Rafael Cruz. They call him the Razor. He runs illegal loans on the East End. Everyone in Houston knows his reputation. When he says corrections, he means violence. Broken bones, burned cars, people disappearing. I swallowed hard, my throat painfully dry. And my children owe him money? She nodded. Yes. David took the largest share, $150,000. Elena borrowed $120. Marco, $100. Add the interest. It's $370 total. Their salaries could never cover it. They've been drowning for months, pretending everything is fine. Pieces began to fall into place in my mind, each one heavier than the last. The lavish snacks Elena brought, the new watch on David's wrist, the whispers that always stopped when I entered the room. I had mistaken extravagance for stability, but it was all borrowed, stolen. Lucia's voice dropped lower. That's why they tricked you into signing those documents. But the banks flagged the transfers. They need you alive, conscious, in person, to ratify anything above $100,000. And if you don't, her silence said more than words. Images flashed in my head, my staircase, a misplaced rug, the bottle of wine they pressed into my hand. She leaned closer, whispering as if the walls could hear. I also overheard Elena on the phone this morning. She said, if Plan A didn't work, they'd use Plan B. She mentioned words like accident, fall, and quick inheritance. Mrs. Ofterclated. Ramirez, they're preparing to make it look natural. I pressed my hand over my mouth, fighting back a sob. My children, the people I had given my life to, were ready to erase me for money. They're planning to kill me. I whispered, the words tasting like poison. Lucia nodded slowly, her eyes shining with both fear and loyalty. Yes, and that's why I couldn't stay silent. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at Lucia's phone, unable to breathe. My children's laughter still drifted faintly from the beach, but it sounded like a cruel echo from another world. Mrs. Ofterclated. Ramirez. Lucia urged softly. We don't have to fight this alone. I already went to the police last night. They took me seriously. An inspector is waiting for you right now. Waiting for me. My voice was a whisper. Yes. I told him everything. He said, the evidence needed to come from you too. Please let's go. I nodded, numb, and she started the car. The drive back toward Houston blurred past me billboards, refineries, neighborhoods I no longer recognized. My heart thudded so loudly, I thought it might drown out the sound of the tires on asphalt. At the downtown station, the air was cold, sterile, humming with fluorescent light. A man stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp, his dark eyes sharp with focus. Mrs. Repart. Ramirez? His voice carried authority and a surprising gentleness. I am Inspector Daniel Foster. I am in charge of this case. I sat across from his desk, Lucia beside me for courage. The inspector listened intently as I described the barbecue, the papers, the strange drowsiness. He asked detailed questions, scribbling notes quickly but never rushing me. Ma'am, he said finally, based on what Torres provided and what you've shared, we have grounds for immediate forensic testing. May we take blood and hair samples? I agreed. Though my hands trembled as a technician entered with sterile equipment, the needle's sting barely registered compared to the ache in my chest. Minutes later, the results came back. Inspector Foster read them aloud. Positive for lorazepam metabolites and traces of a secondary substance not sold legally, cetrolam, a synthetic compound that causes confusion and memory loss. The timeline suggests you ingested both within the last week. My breath hitched. Proof. Proof that my own children had drugged me. The inspector leaned forward, folding his hands. Here's what happens next. We've already obtained warrants to search your children's homes and offices. Their accounts are frozen to prevent any sudden transfers. But documentary evidence, while strong, is not always enough in court. We need recorded admissions. You mean you want me to face them again? Yes, he said calmly. Tonight, at David's house. You'll wear discreet recording devices. They will try to persuade you to give them access to your savings. That's when they'll reveal their intentions. Well, capture everything. Fear coursed through me like ice water. To return knowingly into the lion's den felt unbearable. Yet one glance at Lucia, who risked everything for me, steadied my resolve. I straightened my shoulders. If this is what it takes to stop them, Inspector I'll do it. By the time I left Inspector Foster's office, the sun was setting over Houston, casting long shadows across the streets. The city looked ordinary, but I knew nothing was ordinary anymore. My own children were plotting my death. Tonight, I would step back into their world, armed, not with trust, but with hidden wires and the eyes of the law watching. In a briefing room upstairs, 2 officers laid out the devices on a table. Each piece looked deceptively simple. This, said Sergeant Alvarez, lifting a small black button, is a high-sensitivity microphone. It will replace one of the buttons on your blouse. Range, 15 feet. He handed me a thin silver pen. Press the tip twice for a silent alarm. 3 times if you believe your life is in immediate danger. Within 90 seconds, our team will breach. Another officer placed a pair of reading glasses in front of me. They looked like any you'd buy at the pharmacy. A microcamera is built into the frame. It streams live to our surveillance van. Well, see what you see. My hands trembled as I picked them up. And if they suspect something? That's why we've rehearsed your alibi. Inspector Foster reminded me. You felt dizzy at the beach. Lucia found you near the parking lot, worried about your blood pressure, and drove you to David's house. That's the story. Stick to it. Lucia sat beside me, her expression determined, and I'll be there the whole time. I'll handle food, drinks, anything they try to hand you. They won't get near you with another dose of poison. I reached for her hand, squeezing it. You don't have to put yourself in danger. Yes, I do. She answered firmly. You once paid my daughter's hospital bills when you didn't have to. You showed me kindness. Tonight, I show you loyalty. The officers ran final checks, clipping the devices in place. The button mic settled against my chest. The pen slipped into my purse. The glasses rested on my nose, their weight unfamiliar yet strangely reassuring. Mrs. Ramirez, Inspector Foster said at last, his tone steady. You are not alone. Well, be stationed 2 blocks away. Eyes on you every second. If they try anything, well, move in fast. I took a long, steady breath. My life had shrunk into this moment. Mother against children. Truth against betrayal. Fear gnawed at me. But beneath it burned something stronger, resolve. If this is the only way to protect myself, I whispered, then I am ready. The drive to David's house felt longer than it really was. Lucia gripped the wheel tightly, her knuckles pale, while I sat in silence, every bump in the road rattling through my chest. By the time we pulled up to his 2-story brick home in a quiet Houston suburb, my pulse was pounding so loud I feared it would drown out the tiny microphone hidden on my blouse. The porch light glowed warmly, but it no longer looked welcoming. It looked like a stage where the final act of a play was about to unfold. The door opened before we could knock. David stepped out, his smile wide, his arms spread as if nothing in the world were wrong. Mom! Thank God. We were so worried when you disappeared from the beach, he said, pulling me into a hug that now felt suffocating. I clung to the rehearsed story. Lucia found me near the parking lot. I felt dizzy, must-have been the heat. She thought it best I come here and rest. David nodded quickly, relief washing over his features. Of course. Mom, come in. Alina's making dinner, and Marcos already inside. The living room smelled of garlic and herbs, candles flickering on the table. Elena emerged from the kitchen in a designer apron, her cheeks flushed from the stove. She kissed me on the cheek with forced tenderness. You scared us. Mama, sit. Please. Let me get you some water. Marco appeared next, lounging on the sofa with a grin that looked more like a mask. Good to see you up and moving. M.A. Thought we'd have to call an ambulance. I lowered myself onto the couch, clutching the cool glass Lucia handed me. I watched them all closely, searching their faces for the children I once knew, but seeing only shadows of desperation. David cleared his throat. Mom, we've been talking about something important. We think it's time to simplify your finances. At your age, all that paperwork must be stressful. Elena perched on the arm of the sofa, nodding eagerly. A joint account would help. One of us could handle the bills, the transfers, the boring details. You'd have nothing to worry about. I widened my eyes in practiced confusion. A joint account? Wouldn't that mean I'd lose control of my own money? Not at all. David replied smoothly. It's just for convenience. Emergencies happen. Mom, what if you felt dizzy again? Or worse, wouldn't it be safer if one of us could step in immediately? I sipped the water, pretending to consider. I've been worried about documents I signed last week. I can't quite remember what they were. The reaction was instant. They exchanged quick glances, a silent conversation flashing between them. Elena forced a laugh. Oh, Mama, that was just health insurance updates. Nothing important. Marco leaned forward, lowering his voice. The truth is, Mom, we've had some financial setbacks. Just temporary. But if you let us help manage things, it'll all be fine. I tilted my head. Setbacks? Like debts? David hesitated before answering, his voice tighter now. Yes, but nothing you need to worry about. We just need access to some funds to keep everything steady. I let a pause stretch, then spoke softly. $370,000? The silence that followed was thick as cement. Elena's eyes widened. Marco's grin vanished. David's jaw clenched. The number had hit its mark. David's face drained of color. How do you know that number? He stammered. I clasped my hands together to stop them from shaking, because it appeared in transactions with my signature. A signature I don't remember making. Elena gasped and covered her mouth, tears welling instantly. Marco cursed under his breath. Pacing across the living room, the air grew heavy, like a storm pressing down on the walls. David rubbed his forehead, finally collapsing into the chair across from me. His voice cracked. Mom, we didn't want you to find out like this. We owe Rafael Cruz. They call him the Razor. He's not someone you can just ignore. Elena whispered. He gave us until Thursday. If we don't pay, hell come for us, and maybe for you too. I forced my tone to sound bewildered, fragile. So you thought the answer was to steal my savings? To drug me? To sign away everything I own? Silence. The three of them exchanged haunted looks. Finally, Marco broke. His voice trembled. It wasn't just that. Ma, there was another plan. I leaned forward slightly, though my heart hammered so loud I was sure the hidden mic picked it up. What plan? Elena sobbed, her words spilling like poison. If you wouldn't cooperate. If the banks demanded you be present. We had to make it look natural. A fall down the stairs. Or medicine that would make your heart stop. You're 76. Mama. No one would question it. My breath caught in my throat. Tears blurred my vision. But I forced myself to keep my voice steady. You were planning to kill me. David looked me dead in the eye, desperation hardening into something colder. It wasn't about wanting you gone. It was survival. If you died naturally, the inheritance would be processed quickly. Wed pay Rafael and move on. The betrayal carved through me like glass. My children, my flesh and blood, had mapped out my death like it was a business transaction. And you all agreed to this? My voice broke. Both a mother's grief and a trap tightening around them. Elena nodded miserably. I researched sedatives that mimic a heart attack. Marco asked a funeral home about fast cremations. David said he would stay with you to make sure it looked peaceful. I pressed the back of my hand to my mouth, hiding both my sobs and the faint blinking light of the camera in my glasses. They had confessed everything. But then, David's eyes narrowed. He studied me, too sharply, too long. Why are you so calm? Mom, you're usually emotional. Now you sound rehearsed. Elena frowned. And that blouse, you weren't wearing that at the beach? Marco stepped closer, suspicion flashing across his face. He reached toward my chest, his fingers brushing the disguised button. His expression darkened. There's something here, he muttered. With a sudden yank, he ripped the microphone free. His eyes went wild. She's recording us. At that instant, the trap began to collapse, Not on me, but on them. David held the torn microphone in his fist, his face twisted with fury. You betrayed us, Mom, he hissed. You brought them here. Elena's voice rose in panic. The cars outside, I knew something was wrong. She set us up. Marco lunged toward Lucia, his arm raised as if to strike. It was you! You dragged her into this! Before I could even cry out, the world erupted. The front and back doors crashed open at once, splintering under the weight of booted feet. Shouts filled the air. Police! On the ground! Now! Armed officers stormed the living room, their weapons trained, their voices like thunder. David froze, still clutching the mic, his bravado collapsing. Elena backed into the wall, hands shaking uncontrollably. Marco stumbled as officers forced him to the floor, metal cuffs clamping tight around his wrists. The chaos blurred flashlights sweeping, radios crackling, boots pounding on polished hardwood. I sat frozen on the sofa, clutching my glass of untouched water, as if holding onto normalcy in the middle of a hurricane. Inspector Foster was among the first inside, his voice calm but commanding. Mrs. Ramirez, are you hurt? I shook my head, my breath ragged. No. I am all right. Lucia pressed against the wall, her face pale but her eyes blazing with defiance. I am fine, she said quickly when an officer checked her. The sound of Velcro straps, zip ties, and clinking chains filled the room as my 3 children were restrained. David struggled, shouting, We're your family. Mom, you can't do this to us. I looked at him with tears streaming down my face. You stopped being my family when you decided my death was worth more than my life. An officer at the door called out, Inspector, confirmation just came in. Rafael Cruz, alias the Razor, is in custody along with 2 associates. We found weapons and ledgers matching the debts. The weight that pressed on my chest for weeks finally lifted. My children's crimes were no longer hidden shadows. They were shackled, undeniable, exposed. But the relief came with grief so heavy it nearly broke me. That night, in the flashing red-blue lights of police cruisers, I realized I had saved my life and lost my family forever. The weeks that followed passed in a haze of interviews, statements, and endless paperwork. My face was splashed across local news, elderly widows, children charged in murder plot. I hated the publicity, but it also meant one thing: the truth could no longer be buried. By December, the case reached the Harris County Courthouse. The building loomed heavy with history, its marble floors echoing with footsteps, its air thick with tension. I sat on a wooden bench near the front, my hands folded tightly in my lap, as the trial of my own children began. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Angela Price, wasted no time laying out the case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, her voice steady. This is not a story of poverty or desperation. It is a story of betrayal. The defendants, David, Elena, and Marco Ramirez, conspired to drug, defraud, and ultimately murder their own mother in exchange for money. Gasps rippled through the gallery as she played the recordings captured by my glasses and microphone. Every word echoed in that courtroom. Elena describing sedatives, Marco mentioning funeral arrangements, David calmly admitting they'd let Rafael the Razor profit from my death. The defense scrambled, painting a picture of frightened children pressured by a violent loan shark. Their lawyers spoke with trembling sincerity. They were desperate, manipulated by a criminal. Their love for their mother never died. They simply lost their way. But their words crumbled under evidence. The forged documents, the toxicology reports proving I had been drugged, the financial records showing the debts they had hidden, and finally, the testimony of Lucia Torres. She stood tall, her voice clear, recounting every detail she had overheard. I could not stay silent. she said, meeting the jury's gaze. I knew if I didn't act, Mrs. Braddock Bisses, Ramirez would not be alive today. The courtroom grew still when Rafael Cruz himself was brought in, shackled and scowling, facing decades in prison. He chose to cooperate. Yeah, they owed me. They promised me quick money after their mom's accident. They begged for more time. His testimony sealed the narrative. After days of testimony, the jury deliberated less than 3 hours. The verdict came swift and sharp. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted fraud, and forgery. I closed my eyes, tears spilling down my cheeks. Relief mingled with sorrow. The judge sentenced each of my children to 15 years in prison, with no chance of parole before serving 10. Rafael Cruz received 20 years. As the bailiffs led my children away in chains, David turned to me. His eyes were no longer furious, only hollow. Mom, please. I wanted to answer, but no words would come. For the first time in my life, silence felt heavier than speech. After the sentencing, I returned to my quiet home in Houston. The rooms felt cavernous, echoing with memories of birthdays, holidays, and laughter that now seemed like echoes from another lifetime. I had survived, but I was not the same. My blood family was gone, not by death, but by choice, by their own actions. For weeks, I grieved as if they had already died. I replayed their words from the recordings, their cold calculations, their desperation. Each time, the same knife twisted in my chest. How could my own children plot against me? Yet, amid the grief, a small ember of determination refused to die. One afternoon, Lucia came by with her little boy, Mateo. He was 9. Shy at first, but when he handed me a drawing of a house surrounded by flowers, something inside me broke and healed at once. "You're like a grandma to me now," he whispered. I hugged him tightly, tears soaking into his hair. In that moment, I realized I did still have family, just not in the way I once imagined. With the settlement from the frozen accounts, I decided to put my resources where they mattered. I established the Ramirez Center, a small nonprofit in Houston's East End, offering free legal advice and counseling for elderly people facing financial exploitation. I wanted no one else to walk blind into the traps I had nearly fallen into. Lucia became my right hand, managing outreach and volunteers. Mateo often sat in the office corner doing his homework, occasionally running up to show me his math worksheets with pride. I supported his schooling, setting up a trust so his future would be secure in ways my own children had tried to steal from me. The first few months were overwhelming, but deeply rewarding. Every time an older man or woman walked through our doors with fear in their eyes and left with hope in their hearts, I felt Carlos smiling down on me. For the first time since his death, I didn't feel alone anymore. I had a mission. I had a chosen family. And I had a legacy worth protecting, not of money, but of resilience. On Christmas Eve, nearly a year after that day at the beach, I sat by the window of my living room. Outside, Houston glowed with holiday lights, strings of red and gold twinkling across porches. Children's laughter drifted faintly from the street, mingling with the soft hum of carols on the radio. For the first time in years, my heart felt steady. In my lap lay an old leather journal, the one Carlos had given me on our 50th anniversary. I opened it to a blank page and began to write not about grief or betrayal, but about survival and renewal. I wrote about how I had walked onto a beach with 3 children I thought I could trust, and left with the knowledge they wanted me dead. I wrote about a text message that saved my life, about a brave woman named Lucia who chose courage over fear, and about a little boy who gave me the word grandma again when I thought it was lost forever. I also wrote about pain, the kind that doesn't fade quickly, the kind that lingers when you realize the people you gave your life to valued money more than your heartbeat. But pain, I discovered, does not have to be the ending. It can be the soil from which something stronger grows. The Ramirez Center had already helped dozens of elders. Some came trembling, clutching forged documents. Some came in tears, abandoned by family. Each time we guided them to safety, I felt a piece of my broken spirit mend. Carlos would have been proud. When the clock struck midnight, I closed the journal and whispered into the quiet room. Family is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by loyalty, love, and the willingness to protect. My children had chosen betrayal, but in their absence, life had given me a second chance. The loyalty of Lucia, the laughter of Mateo, the gratitude of strangers who became friends. I leaned back in my chair, the Christmas lights reflecting in the window, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. My story was not one of tragedy, but of transformation. Betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also revealed the truth. Wealth means nothing if it costs a life, but it means everything when it saves one. And that, I realized, was the legacy I would leave behind.